Welcome everyone to this idea session of the Better Tech Fair. My name is Dorothée Baumann-Pauly and my colleague is Serra Cremer. We're both affiliated with the NYU Stern Center for Business Human Rights and the Geneva Center for Business Human Rights, two institutions at business schools that focus on the human rights aspects of business models. And in the context of Better Tech, we're really happy to be part of this event because the human rights aspects of Better Tech are often overlooked. In today's idea session, we want to take you to make a deep dive with us into the cobalt supply chain from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Cobalt is a critical battery mineral that powers our electronics and our electric cars. These electric cars are a key component in the strategy towards meeting climate change targets. So certainly a key component for Better Tech, but the cobalt supply chain comes with a number of human rights risks. Serra, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Doro. So as Doro already alluded to, cobalt is a key component in rechargeable lithium-ion batteries that we use in our laptops, smartphones, and also electric vehicles. And the rise in cobalt demand in the next decades will predominantly be a result of the rise in e-vehicle sales. And unlike any other metal, cobalt offers a long lifespan and high energy density, which determines how long, how far a single charge can power an electric car. The demand for cobalt is expected to surge fourfold by 2030, which means that automakers such as Tesla, BMW, Volkswagen, Volvo, and also electronics manufacturers, very well-known brands like Apple, Samsung, and LG will all need cobalt to manufacture their products, at least in the near future. And they will all have to come to the DRC, while there are some exceptions I'll speak shortly. More than half of the world's cobalt deposits are located in the DRC, in the African Copper Belt region, also known as Katanga. And as you can see from the size of the flags here, for each cobalt producer, the DRC's cobalt reserves and production capacity is unparalleled. All other cobalt producing countries are very unlikely to cover the rising demand for cobalt in the coming years. To be exact, the DRC cobalt reserves are 51% of the world's cobalt reserves. And in terms of global cobalt production, the cobalt that comes from Congo accounts for more than 70% of the world's cobalt. So, and all the other cobalt producing countries each account for less than 5%. So it's unparalleled. And these two facts also demonstrate that companies that need rechargeable batteries will depend on Congolese cobalt, which means that they will either directly or indirectly source from the DRC. It can be through Chinese processors, producers, but it will come very often from the DRC. Can companies avoid the DRC? Well, some like BMW are currently sourcing from Morocco and Australia. Others like Tesla are investing in cobalt-free technologies, battery technologies, but they continue to buy cobalt from the DRC. Also, completely bypassing the DRC production will be unachievable given the scale of cobalt required in the future, but also it's very undesirable from a social development perspective. And that's because in many resource-rich developing countries like the DRC, mining provides a livelihood for millions in rural and regional communities. And that's often in the form of artisanal mining, or ASM. What's ASM? As opposed to large-scale mining, artisanal and small-scale mining, ASM, refers to mining without the use of heavy machinery. And it's basically just independent miners, Congolese, using basic tools and bare hands, digging tunnels that can be up to 90 meters deep to reach and extract minerals. And it's a very, very dangerous activity. ASM is the workforce of the mining sector. And in fact, in the DRC, up to 30% of the Congolese production comes from artisanal mines or artisanal miners. There are approximately 40 to 100 million artisanal miners globally. And in terms of the DRC, there are 1 to 2 million Congolese that depend directly or indirectly on the production of cobalt. And there is no diversified economy in this part of the DRC, which means that there are no other jobs. With no alternatives, mining is the only way to earn a decent salary for people desperate to feed their families. Here on this slide, on the left side, you see artisanal mining activities, and on the right side, you see an industrial mining zone but that doesn't mean that this industrial mining zone is from artisanal mining. In fact, because there are proven cobalt reserves in industrial zones, artisanal miners are more likely to go and enter unauthorized these concessions because it's more lucrative. They don't have to waste time on looking for cobalt. Mining is a very dangerous activity, as I said, and it does not require formal training. Anyone with a hammer and a hook and the physical strength can mine. And a dangerous sector like artisanal mining poses many human rights risks, and that's what Dora will talk about on the next slide.
Thanks, Sarah. So you just learned that for companies in need of cobalt for their batteries, either in electronics or in automotives, they will not be able long-term, given the growing demand, to avoid the DRC or to avoid cobalt coming from artisanal mines. These pictures are from Amnesty International and the human rights risks in the cobalt supply chain, particularly in those artisanal mines, are well documented. Key risks include mine safety issues because those tunnels that are dug by hand, they can easily collapse. There are regularly fatalities and injuries. But also children are sometimes supporting the activity, as you can see on the picture on the left. But sometimes they're also just playing on rather dangerous mine sites. And to ensure that human rights standards are respected in the supply chains requires concerted efforts of all stakeholders in the supply chain. To better understand what strategies could look like, I actually went to the DRC in September 2019. Again, I went there not to record and document violations. I think others have done that brilliantly. I wanted to understand what kind of strategies can we develop to address these human rights risks. And I see two ways forward. One way forward, I would call these formalization of artisanal small-scale mining sites. While I was in the DRC, I actually analyzed a pilot project that was spearheaded by a Swiss commodity trading company called Trafigura, where they tried to establish standards and monitor those standards at an artisanal mining site on a concession from which they sourced exclusively. The site was called Mutoshi, and this pilot experience actually led a state entity, the Entreprise Générale du Cobalt, to release so-called responsible sourcing standards just this year. So it's a pilot project that fully translated into more common standards for all artisanally mined cobalt from the DRC. Another strategy is building upon this formalization experience, namely multi-stakeholder platforms that as a collective want to ensure that these standards are now mainstream beyond individual companies. And we're members of the Global Battery Alliance, and there's a sub-initiative called the Cobalt Action Partnership. And together with over 60 other stakeholders from companies and civil society and academia, we're now thinking about how can we establish responsible sourcing standards for the entire cobalt industry. So in conclusion, we believe now is the time to act. We need to develop sustainable solutions to human rights issues in the battery supply chain. After all, we need those electric cars to meet climate change targets. And it's also clear that the transition to green energy must be environmentally and socially responsible. Those two dimensions of sustainability are inextricably linked, and we need to pursue them in parallel. On this next slide, you can see our publications related to this topic, starting with our research report published in the WEF white paper series, Making Mining Safe and Fair. And based on this research report, we have written for practitioners' journals and also op-eds in different outlets. So you can find a lot more information on our websites, NYU and also the Geneva Center. The contacts are on the final slide. I thank you for your interest and look forward to your thoughts on this.
Thank you.